Our son chose to leave us behind to marry a woman, and he never came back, not even during the difficult times when my wife was battling cancer. With her departure, he has come back, but this time, his intentions have shifted. At the age of 72, I find myself reflecting on the many chapters of my life. Last week, I faced the heartbreaking loss of my wife, Margaret, who fought bravely against cancer for 2 years. For 48 wonderful years, we shared a love that ran deep and true. Margaret was my anchor, my closest companion, and the love that filled my heart. We shared a wonderful life, nestled in the same spacious home we purchased as newlyweds. There was a constant flow of laughter and love in our home, particularly during the years when our son James was growing up. James was our one and only, and we cherished him deeply. We guided him to the finest schools and nurtured every one of his dreams and ambitions. Once upon a time, there was a young boy who stood out for his kindness and dedication. He was always respectful to others and put in the effort in everything he did. As he embarked on his college journey, our hearts swelled with pride. We imagined he would return home after graduation, perhaps land a job in the city and establish his roots close by. Yet, life had a different story to tell. In his final year, James crossed paths with a girl named Sophie. In a whirlwind of emotions, they found themselves deeply in love and tied the knot just after their graduation ceremony. We felt joy for them, yet a sense of concern lingered in our hearts. In those early days, they were filled with youthful energy, and James was just embarking on his journey and his career. We extended an invitation for them to stay with us until they found their footing, but they turned it down, eager to carve their own path. In the beginning, James made it a point to call often. He would share stories about his new job, their cozy apartment, and the adventures of their life together. As time unfolded, the calls dwindled, weeks morphed into months, and before we realized it, an entire year slipped by without a word from him. We made several attempts to reach him, but he never answered the call. We penned our letters, yet they remained unanswered. It felt as though he had vanished from our lives entirely. Margaret and I felt a deep sorrow, struggling to grasp the reasons behind our son's decision to distance himself from us. We found ourselves questioning whether we had made a mistake, if perhaps we had fallen short as parents in some way. The house seemed to echo with a profound sense of emptiness, more than it ever had before. Oh, how we longed for the sound of James's laughter, the joyful way he'd bound down the stairs each morning, and even the delightful chaos he'd create in the kitchen after whipping up a midnight snack. With each passing year, we grew accused James to the quiet that surrounded us. We turned our attention to one another, to the things we love to do, and to the friends who enrich our lives. We embarked on a journey, exploring some of the destinations we had longed to see. Yet, there remained an emptiness in our hearts, one that was distinctly shaped like James. With each Christmas, each birthday, and every milestone, our thoughts would drift to him, pondering how he was faring in life. As Margaret fell ill, I found myself wishing that James would somehow learn of it and return home. In my mind, I could see him bursting through the door, a whirlwind of apologies and concern swirling around him. Yet, he never arrived. I personally looked after Margaret, with the support of our wonderful neighbors and friends. Watching the vibrant woman I loved fade away was a difficult journey, yet we faced it together, just as we had confronted every other challenge in our lives. When Margaret left this world, I found myself adrift. Without her presence, the house seemed to echo with silence, a hollow reminder of what once was. I drifted through each room, my fingers grazing her belongings, reminiscing about our shared moments, envisioning her presence. Attending the funeral was one of the most challenging experiences I've ever faced. I envisioned it as something truly special, a heartfelt homage to the incredible woman she had been. On the day of the funeral, a somber atmosphere enveloped the gathering. As I stood at the entrance of the church, I welcomed each person who walked through the doors. And then there he was, James. He had the wisdom of age, with hints of gray gracing his temples. Next to him stood a woman I believed to be Sophie, accompanied by 2 children, a boy and a girl. In that moment, I felt completely paralyzed, unsure of how to respond or what words to utter. With a hint of uncertainty, James made his way towards me. He appeared anxious, his eyes rimmed with red as if tears had recently stained his cheeks. Our eyes locked for a brief moment, and then he wrapped his arms around me in a warm embrace. Initially, it felt a bit uncomfortable, but gradually I found myself easing into the moment. It was as if I had returned to a place that was always meant for me. There wasn't much time for us to share our thoughts before the service began. James and his family joined me in the front row, creating a cozy scene together. As the service unfolded, I noticed the soft sound of his sniffling beside me. As the moment arrived for everyone to recount their cherished memories of Margaret, James rose to his feet, his voice trembling with emotion. He shared how patient and kind Margaret had been. She had a special way of brightening his days, always baking his favorite cookies whenever he felt down. She patiently guided him as he learned to ride a bike, gently bandaging his scraped knees along the way. In the end, emotions ran high, and tears flowed freely among us all. Once the funeral had concluded and the crowd began to disperse, James approached me with a request to have a conversation. We found ourselves in a serene nook of the church. In that moment, he fell apart, his voice filled with regret as he repeatedly said sorry for his absence, for distancing himself, for all the precious moments he let slip away. He shared how he had once been young and foolish, swept away by the desire to show that he could succeed independently. He shared that Sophie had urged him to reach out on numerous occasions, yet he felt too ashamed to do so. As I absorbed his words, I felt my heart shatter once more. Yet, there was a sense of relief washing over me. My son had returned. He still held us in his heart, still cared deeply. He had merely wandered off course for a time. In the end, I found it in my heart to forgive him. How could I not? He was my son, and my love for him was boundless. We embraced once more, and this time it felt just right, so natural, as if no time had slipped away at all. James made sure to introduce me to Sophie and the kids, my grandchildren. It was a moment I could hardly believe. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Ethan who was 8 years old, and a girl named Olivia who was just 6. They were stunning, and from the very start, they referred to me as Grandpa. It felt like a dream unfolding before my eyes. After the funeral, we all returned to the house together. While the kids ventured through the grand old house, dashing up and down the stairs and marveling at every little detail, James and I found ourselves settled in the living room. We spent hours reminiscing, bridging the gap of all those lost years. He shared with me the details of his job, the journey of his life, the challenges he faced, and the victories he celebrated. I shared with him the story of Margaret's illness, the adventures we had on our travels, and how much we had missed him along the way. As the evening unfolded, I finally turned to James and inquired about his plans. After a moment of uncertainty, he opened up about his new job in a different state, where he and his family had made their home. In a charming home, the children thrived in excellent schools, and Sophie found joy in a career that fulfilled her dreams. In his eyes, I could sense the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. He felt a sense of concern for me, anxious about the thought of leaving me by myself in this vast house. Yet, deep down, I understood the path I needed to take. I reassured him that it was all right for him to leave, returning to the rhythm of his life. I expressed my joy at having him back in my life and how wonderful it would be for us to visit one another. At first, James raised his voice in protest. He proposed that I sell the house and relocate nearer to them, but that just wasn't something I could bring myself to do. This house echoed with the memories of Margaret, a testament to our life shared together. It was the place where my heart belonged. Ultimately, James made the decision to return. We set up a routine for our visits and phone calls. As they were about to depart, James wrapped his arms around me in a warm embrace and softly said, "Thank you, Dad. I cherish you deeply." Once they departed, I found myself in Margaret's cherished chair, tears streaming down my face. I shed tears for the years that slipped away, for Margaret, who missed witnessing this moment of healing, and for the grandchildren we never had the chance to know. Yet, tears of joy streamed down my face as I realized my family was complete once more. As I sit here, a week has passed, and I find myself reflecting on whether my choice was the right one. Did I make the right choice by not asking James to move back? Is it selfish of me to remain in this house? Yet, I can't help but reflect on James's journey, his professional path, and the schools his children attend. As I reflect on the life he has crafted for himself, a sense of certainty washes over me. I know I made the right choice. Hey everyone, it's been 3 months since I last shared, and so much has happened in that time. To begin, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all for your warm words and unwavering support. Your words gave me the reassurance I needed to stand firm in my choice not to invite James back home. Following the funeral, James honored his commitment to remain connected. He reached out to me each week, and sometimes even more frequently. We shared stories about everything, his work, the kids, and the little moments of my daily life. Reuniting with my son after all those years was a truly heartwarming experience. It was about a month after the funeral when James unexpectedly arrived for a weekend visit, bringing his family along with him. Seeing them filled my heart with joy. Our weekend was filled with nostalgia as we flipped through old photo albums, sharing cherished tales about Margaret, and enjoying playful moments with the grandkids in the backyard. It seemed as though we were reclaiming moments that had slipped away from us. Much to my astonishment, these visits turned into a frequent event. Every other weekend, James and his family would make the journey to spend time with me. There were moments when they lingered through the night, while other times, their visits were brief, just for the day. Every visit brought joy and vitality back into the home. As the weekends approached, I found myself eagerly anticipating them, dreaming up fun activities and preparing hearty meals for all to enjoy. James appeared to have a real curiosity about my life. He inquired about my circle of friends, the activities I enjoy, and how I was managing in the wake of Margaret's passing. He stepped in to lend a hand with those home repairs I had been avoiding for quite some time. His attention and care truly moved me. It felt as though he was genuinely striving to reconcile for all the years he had been away. Yet, around 2 months into these regular visits, I began to observe something peculiar. James started to delve deeper into financial matters, seeking answers to his growing curiosity. In the beginning, it felt effortless. He would inquire about how I was getting by on just my pension, or whether I had thought about moving to a smaller place. At first, it didn't cross my mind too deeply. I figured he was merely looking out for my well-being. As time went on, the questions started to arise more often, and they grew increasingly detailed. He inquired about my savings, my investments, and even the details of Margaret's life insurance policy. He was curious to find out if I had made any recent updates to my will. These conversations left me feeling uneasy, yet I attempted to shake it off. I reassured myself that James was merely looking out for my well-being as I grew older. Last week marked a turning point when my sister Clara decided to pay a visit. Once James and his family departed on Sunday evening, Clara took a moment to sit me down for a heartfelt conversation. She shared with me that many of our relatives and dear friends had observed James's behavior and were feeling worried. It seems that James had been inquiring about my financial situation with them too. Clara shared that James inquired about the house's value and if she had any insights regarding my pension program. He had even asked if there were any possible inheritances from other relatives. She felt a nagging concern that James's focus might lean more towards my finances rather than mending the bond we once shared. This revelation left me feeling both shocked and hurt. At first, I was reluctant to accept it, but as I reflected on the events of the past few months, it became clear that James's inquiries had gradually shifted to revolve around financial concerns. That moment hit me with a wave of anger and confusion. Could this be the reason he had unexpectedly come back into my life? Was he really only interested in my money? In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting deeply on the situation. I reflected on all the wonderful moments we had experienced together in the past few months. Oh, the laughter that filled the air, the cherished memories we created together, and how James always lent a helping hand around the house. It was challenging to align those experiences with the thought that he could have hidden intentions. There was a part of me that felt the urge to face James right then and there, to seek answers for the way he had been acting. Yet, there was a part of me that felt a twinge of fear. Imagine if it were real? What if I were to lose my son once more, just when I believed I had him back in my life? I chose to pause and watch the unfolding scene around me. I was hesitant to make any assumptions based on what I heard, even if it was from those I held in high regard. I made a promise to myself to observe James more carefully during his next visit, hoping to uncover what he truly meant. At this moment, I find myself facing a challenging situation. I've cherished every moment spent with my son and grandchildren. In recent months, I've experienced a joy that had eluded me for years, yet I find myself unable to shake off the persistent doubts that have begun to surface. In a world where love and self-preservation often collide, I find myself caught in a delicate balance. My heart swells with affection for my son, yet I feel the weight of the need to safeguard my own well-being. It's hard for me to accept that James might only care about my finances, yet I can't ignore what my sister and friends are worried about. I'm feeling anxious about the idea of confronting James, fearing it might push him away once more. At the same time, I can't shake the concern of being taken advantage of. Now, I'm reaching out to you, Reddit. What steps can I take? What are some ways I can uncover James's true intentions while ensuring our newly rebuilt relationship remains intact? Am I being too dramatic about these worries, or is it wise to tread carefully? I would love to hear any thoughts or insights you might have as I work through this tricky situation. It's been a month since I last shared, and I've stumbled upon a challenging revelation regarding my son's true intentions. After reflecting deeply on the advice I gathered, I made the choice to put James to the test, curious to discover whether his newfound interest in my life was sincere or driven by the prospect of financial gain. I devised a plan that I believed would uncover James's genuine nature. It was a moment of clarity when I chose to share with him my decision to sell the house and make the move to be nearer to him and his family. I believed this would provide me with an opportunity to witness his response and understand how he would cope with the idea of me potentially becoming a more lasting presence in his life. As James and his family pulled into the driveway for their weekend visit, I decided to hold off on the topic until after dinner had settled in the air. As the kids filled the living room with laughter and joy, James, Sophie, and I found ourselves gathered around the kitchen table, sharing moments together. With a deep breath, I shared my thoughts about the future that had been weighing on my mind. It was becoming overwhelming for me to manage living alone in this big house. I shared with him how much I missed having family nearby and that I had made the decision to sell the house and relocate closer to them. I observed their expressions intently as I shared my words. James's reaction was a bit of a surprise, not quite what I had envisioned. Rather than displaying joy or enthusiasm at the thought of my presence, he appeared quite surprised. He shot a brief look at Sophie, then turned to me and inquired if I was certain about this choice. There was a hint of worry in his voice, overshadowing any sense of joy. Then James posed the question that had been weighing on my mind: how much did I believe the house would fetch on the market? I shared with him the estimated value, which was quite impressive considering the size of the house and its prime location. Once I brought up the figure, I noticed a glimmer of curiosity light up in James and Sophie's eyes. They bounced back swiftly and began sharing their thoughts on how wonderful it would be to have me nearby. They chatted about various neighborhoods that might be a good fit for me and even extended a helping hand for the move. Yet, there lingered a nagging thought in my mind that their excitement was driven more by the prospect of profit than by any genuine interest in me. As the evening unfolded, James and Sophie grew increasingly lively. They shared their dreams of all the adventures we could embark on together once I made the move. They even mentioned that I might take care of the kids more frequently. At first glance, all appeared well, yet there was an unsettling feeling in the air. As the house settled into silence and the moonlight danced through the windows, I found myself wide awake, unable to drift off into slumber. I found myself going over the conversation again and again, seeking to understand James's responses. Just as I was heading back to my room with a glass of water in hand, I caught the faint sound of hushed voices drifting from the guest room where James and Sophie were staying. It may not have been the best choice, but I found myself unable to resist. I found myself by the door, ears attuned to the sounds around me. The news I received shattered my heart. James and Sophie found themselves deep in conversation about the possibility of putting their house on the market. James shared that with that kind of money, they could settle all their loans and still have a good amount remaining. He shared his dreams of renovating their home, purchasing a new car, and embarking on luxurious vacations. Sophie's excitement was palpable, but then she inquired about my living situation. James's response sent a shiver down my spine. He mentioned that he would try to persuade me to consider moving into a retirement home or an assisted living facility. He shared his thoughts, suggesting that it would be best for all involved, as I would receive constant care, and they could find peace of mind knowing I was looked after. Sophie appeared a bit unsure, yet James was adamant that he could win me over. As I stood there, absorbing the words, a whirlwind of emotions enveloped me: anger, hurt, disappointment, and a profound, aching sadness. Once upon a time, there was my son, the little boy I had nurtured and cherished. Now, he was scheming to take my home and place me in a facility, all for the sake of my money. The weight of the words became too much for me to endure. I found myself pushing open the door without a second thought. James and Sophie leapt in surprise at my unexpected arrival. Their expressions transformed as they recognized that I had caught wind of their discussion, revealing a blend of surprise and remorse. In that fleeting moment, we found ourselves locked in a shared silence, each gaze holding a story of its own. In that moment, the dam broke, and all the hurt and anger I had been keeping inside came rushing out like a flood. I pointed a finger at James, calling him greedy and selfish. I brought up the fact that he hadn't even taken the time to visit his mother during her final days, and now here he was, returning only because he was in need of money. I shared with him that I was aware of all the inquiries he had been making to our relatives and friends regarding my finances. I once believed he genuinely wanted to reconnect, to rebuild our family, but now it feels like it was all just about the money. James found himself in a situation where he felt the need to stand up for himself. He explained that I had gotten it all wrong, that his intentions were simply to prepare for what lies ahead. He insisted he was concerned for my well-being and wanted to ensure I was looked after, yet his words felt empty considering what I had just overheard. Sophie sat in quiet solitude, her tears flowing freely down her cheeks. She remained silent, neither defending James nor providing any explanations of her own. In her quietude, there was a world of meaning waiting to be uncovered. I expressed to both of them my desire for them to depart right away. In the stillness of the night, a sense of urgency gripped me. I simply couldn't endure their presence in my home for another moment. James voiced his concerns, insisting that leaving with the kids asleep was out of the question, but I stood my ground. As they rushed to gather their belongings and rouse the children, I remained in the living room, enveloped in a sense of numbness. The grandchildren, still rubbing the sleep from their eyes, looked around in bewilderment and asked what was going on. With a heavy heart, I found it hard to put my feelings into words. Instead, I embraced them tightly and whispered my farewell, pondering if our paths would cross once more. As they were about to depart, James made one final attempt to convey his thoughts, to express his regrets, but I found myself unable to listen. The trust had shattered, leaving me wondering if there was any way to mend it again. I made it clear to him, no returning, no calls, no contact of any kind. As they disappeared into the darkness, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions wash over me. After they departed, the house seemed to echo with an emptiness that was more profound than before. As the night unfolded, I found myself nestled in Margaret's cherished chair, lost in thought about how everything had spiraled into chaos. As I reflected on the joyful moments we created in this house, I couldn't help but think of Margaret and the laughter we shared, and later, the cherished times with James as he blossomed into his own. It felt surreal that it had reached this point. In the days that came after, I experienced a whirlwind of feelings. Frustration bubbled up towards James for his trickery, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment in myself for falling for it so easily. In the quiet moments, the weight of losing my son and grandchildren settled heavily on my heart once more. Yet, it was the profound, aching loneliness that truly enveloped me, echoing through my days. I thought about reaching out to James, hoping to mend things, but each time I lifted the phone, the memory of what I had overheard stopped me in my tracks, and I set it down again. The hurt was still raw, the sense of betrayal cut profoundly. I chose to embrace the journey ahead and keep moving forward with my life. I reached out to my sister and a handful of close friends, sharing the details of what had transpired. In those shadowy moments, their unwavering support and deep understanding became my guiding light. Once upon a time, I began my journey as a volunteer at a local community center. This experience filled my heart with a sense of purpose and brought me closer to others in our vibrant community. I chose to remain in my home. This was the place where Margaret and I crafted our lives, brimming with countless cherished memories. I wouldn't allow James's actions to overshadow that. Bringing a part-time housekeeper on board was a game changer for me. It really lightened the load when it came to keeping everything in order around the house. With each passing week, the weight of the pain started to lift. There were times when sadness washed over me, particularly when my thoughts drifted to my grandchildren. Yet, amidst those feelings, I discovered a newfound appreciation for the tranquility and freedom that my life offered. I've begun to revisit some of my old hobbies, and along the way, I've also met some wonderful new friends at the community center. As I reflect on the past, I see that although the journey was filled with pain, it imparted crucial lessons about self-respect and the need for caution, even among those we hold dear. It's a bittersweet moment for me, feeling a sense of sadness about how things unfolded with James. Yet, there's also a flicker of pride within me for having the courage to stand up for what I believe is right. As I find myself in our old house, enveloped by the echoes of Margaret's presence, a wave of contentment washes over me. Though life has taken unexpected turns, I am resolute in making the most of the years ahead. I will embrace this journey on my own terms, holding close the truth of who I am and honoring Margaret's memory along the way.